Hi, welcome back to Geekbrostalk. This is week 12/6, 2015. Thanks guys for checking our stuff out. Thanks for watching, liking, subscribing, all that. So today's topics, we're going to talk about the PSX event, which is also known as the PlayStation Experience. It's a little convention up in San Francisco. Just a lot of there were developers showing off their games and a lot of the new PlayStation Virtual stuff. We'll also be talking about iPhone taking away the 3.5mm jack and just kind of like the general evolution of, I guess, phone and hardware, peripherals, accessories. I guess it's kind of similar to when Google decided to take most SD cards out of their Android phones. And then we'll just finish off with my brother's rant about Microsoft. He just recently got a new laptop, and I guess he has a lot to say about it. So, all right, so let's start off. PSX, the PlayStation Experience, again, is a convention with a lot of developers. It's kind of like a PlayStation only, something akin to like E3 or something, right? It looks like a lot of good games are coming out for PlayStation 4. If you guys haven't heard recently, Sony dropped first-party support for the PlayStation Vita, which is pretty huge news. I feel like that's just been a sinking ship ever since, and I don't know. I don't know if they can really, how do you even continue a product where the company who made it doesn't even really support it anymore?
Oh,
I mean,
are you asking?
you have any thoughts on that, right? So PlayStation, like Sony themselves, aren't making any like first-party games for the PlayStation Vita anymore. They're just gonna rely on third-party developers to make games for it.
Yeah, the PS Vita, it's kind of a weird thing because I don't know if this is a direct comparison, but the PS Vita, when it first came out and I saw it, especially when I saw like what was that game? It has Nathan Drake in it,
Uncharted.
Uncharted.
Yeah.
It looked amazing. I mean, as a handheld, hardware wise, it was awesome.
Mhm.
I think it's the best handheld. And it kind of reminds me, and it's not directly the same, but it kind of reminds me of the Sega Dreamcast. That was one of my favorite game systems. It was powerful. The games looked great on it. But it didn't really get the support, and so it died early. The PS Vita, it's lasted a lot longer, but it was pretty popular in Japan. But it really wasn't popular anywhere else. And especially in Japan, they've already converted over to mobile gaming.
Mhm.
So they're not really console heavy as much as we are in the US. Especially if you talk about handheld consoles, Nintendo is really the only game in town that people still play with. But more people do mobile games now, and so that's not surprising to me. It's just kind of surprising the way that they're doing it.
Mhm.
You yourself are dropping support for your own hardware. Why just not stop it? What I mean?
Mhm.
If the maker isn't supporting it, I don't even know why they're still advertising it or selling it. So
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I think a few other factors as well. It's like they had like a lot of proprietary hardware. For example, the memory cards you had to buy, they had to be specifically for the PS Vita. You couldn't just stick a micro SD card in there or anything else like that. And it was pretty similar with the old PSP as well. Um, yeah, but comparative to that, like I felt like the old PSP did okay. It wasn't like exceptional or anything, but it had a great library. Ton of just like really niche games, a lot of just cool little indie games on it. Comparative to like, I mean, yeah, you said that a lot of people are moving over to mobile gaming now, but I feel like the 3DS library is still actually really good too. It's still pretty compelling as well. Um, maybe it's just like the price of the hardware, like the proprietary hardware, just not that great of a library, and just the fact that as far as like mobile handheld goes, like Nintendo just has the market comparative to the Vita.
yeah, and I forgot about the PSP. I remember when I first bought the PSP, it was a great
Mhm.
piece of hardware. And the great thing is, back then, I don't know if it's a norm now, but it's hackable. You put an emulator on there, it was awesome. You had a
Yeah,
handheld. I forgot about the PSP. I really love the PSP, by the
yeah.
way. It was an awesome piece of hardware.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Especially with hacking. Of course, you're part of the problem at that point, right? You're not supporting the developers, and you kind of just make it worse for them if you're hacking and downloading games. I mean, yeah, you could pirate games on it, but you could also do a lot of cool homebrew stuff like emulators. You said, which it was really neat.
yeah,
But
that kind of whenever I get to my conversation, that what you're talking about, how you're hacking it or you're putting stuff that's it's not made to do.
Hmm.
That goes to a different discussion. And so
Hmm.
I want, yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of bad. I wish it was successful though, because I
Mhm.
thought it was a great piece of hardware.
Yeah, and I guess like we can talk about like the ethics and that. Like as far as putting like homebrew stuff on there, and if you guys don't know what homebrew is, it's pretty much just like kind of custom applications, not necessarily like pirating a game itself. But you put like emulators on there. You probably put like a TI-84 calculator on there. Just pretty much any sort of program on there. Anyways, yeah. So I guess from PSX, there's some cool titles on the Vita, but again, they're all third party. They showed off the new Final Fantasy VII remake, actual gameplay footage of it. It looks amazing. I know a lot of fans have been asking for a remake for ever since the game pretty much like came out, or shortly after the game came out. So I believe Final Fantasy VII came out in like I want to say '97.
Yeah, 97.
So
Yeah.
it's been close to almost 20 years now. You know, so why do you think they chose to wait this long for a remake? Especially, I think back when the PS3 came out, they did like a CGI, trailer for Final Fantasy VII just to showcase the graphical fidelity of the PS3. But why did they wait so long now to, I guess, tease the fans, and why did they decide to do it now?
Well, my personal feeling is it's all about the marketing and the money. The money. I'm sorry, money first, because Final Fantasy VII, it was the most popular Final Fantasy, the most adored out of all of them. But there's been so many. Here's the thing: they have so many different games related to the Final Fantasy property. There's no reason for them to release it any early. They could have done it in the PS3. It would have still looked awesome, right? I mean, it had the power to do it. So it wasn't a technical thing. I think it was all marketing. They sell so many different games, mobile, console, PC related to Final Fantasy. It wouldn't even matter when they would release it because people love Final Fantasy VII so much. It wouldn't matter if it came out 20 years later, which it is. Which it is. It's almost
Hmm.
20 years, and people are still gonna buy it. And
Yeah.
Square Enix, they're not dumb. Ever since between then and now, they've been like, who knows, 50, 60 Final Fantasy related titles. So Final Fantasy is always in people's minds. I just think it makes more sense now because from a marketing standpoint, a lot of remakes are being done. There's been a lot of reboots of the Tomb Raider series has been rebooted. What else? I mean, there's been a lot of reboots of series.
Hmm.
I can't, but that's the one that quickly comes to mind is the Tomb
Yeah.
Raider being rebooted. You know, so kind of like movies, everything getting rebooted, remade,
Hmm.
whatever. So it makes sense. You know.
Yeah. I don't know. So I may disagree on that a little bit because I feel like the Final Fantasy brand has kind of diminished a little bit. With offerings like such as 13, it was like okay received. It wasn't like great by any means. Final Fantasy 14 MMORPG was also okay. I'm wondering if they did it earlier at the height of their popularity and their fan base, which I think may have been a few years ago as compared to today. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, and and people and gamers have been talking about this for a while. Square Enix, they haven't really moved beyond their turn-based strategy of fighting games. I mean, I'm sorry, of RPGs. They haven't really
Hmm.
changed it much. Whereas people who are really into RPGs, it's more open world like Skyrim or The Witcher 3.
Hmm.
They're getting a lot different now.
Yeah.
And um, Square Enix, they're sticking to what they know, and what sells, because if you look at the Dragon Quest series, it hasn't changed much
Hmm.
neither, you know. So
Yeah, and maybe even we can kind of boil my point down to JRPGs in general, right? Some JRPGs just I don't feel as are popular as today as they were before, but maybe it's just like my misperception.
no,
Anyway.
I tend to agree with you. I think JRPGs they're more popular. I think for like the mobile space on your phones and stuff. But in terms of console gaming, I think the new westernized RPGs they're a lot more popular. If you're a
Hmm.
hardcore RPG or even in Japan, more people are playing Western RPGs and also stuff like Dota. They kind of replace
Hmm.
RPGs. I mean that's just my thoughts on it. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, so gameplay trailer look really good. Graphics look amazing as always. I guess the gameplay now it's more active. It's not turn based anymore. I think it's more akin to like the Final Fantasy 12 that came out on PlayStation 2 quite a while back. Okay, so yeah, it looks cool. PlayStation also showed off some VR stuff, so that'll be interesting. I guess just what do you know off the top of your head on VR right now between like the Oculus Rift, the HTC Vive, I believe, and like the PlayStation VR stuff? I
Well,
guess Samsung has their hand in it too, right?
yes. I mean,
Yeah.
me personally, I'm more interested in the Google Cardboard box, the Cardboard VR.
Mhm.
So I think I'm gonna try that one first. Now, in terms of what I think about VR, VR has been a thing in gaming for a long time, even before the Virtual Boy. I mean, companies such as Atari had prototypes for the VR machine. So even since the 90s, I think the Lawnmower Man, that was VR. So VR has always been in the gaming landscape, but I don't think it's ever gotten to a level where it's actually playable. That's
Mhm.
actually and that actually doesn't give you headaches. You know, so
Yeah.
the new technologies, especially with the Oculus and the Sony VR, looks cool. I think they're getting better at it in terms of technology, but in terms of actual gameplay, we'll see. I saw the demo for the Oculus, where they're inside this elevator, and it goes up, and it's like this fantasy world, and it had roller coasters and so forth. It looks really cool. I just don't know at this point whether or not the technology and people are ready for it, because like some of it is so real. Like what if you have like, and I know this, maybe some people don't think about it, but what if you have a heart attack playing a
Hmm.
game, because it it's so real, and they have these two HD screens on there, the sound and everything. Your mind doesn't know reality from unreality, so you
Yeah.
could potentially die. I'm sorry, you could. If it was so real, you die. You could sue the manufacturers, and also, how do you make it gameplay? Always goes back down to gameplay. How do you make it interesting to use VR?
Hmm.
So we'll see. I think this next few years VR is going to be more common, and I think at some point it's going to be like the holodeck on Star Trek. I
Hmm.
mean, it's going that way. I mean, so especially with like the Wii and the Sony's and the Connect, they're all heading that way anyway. So augmented reality. So
Yeah. So the way you put it sounds like an old school like video, like an old school Sega or Nintendo ads. Like it's so real, you could possibly get a heart attack from it,
yeah,
or like an old Mortal Kombat ad or something, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think me personally, I think the applications for VR, it's going to be more useful in real world applications, and
Hmm.
not gaming. A good point is surgery. A lot of doctors, more and more, they could actually do virtual surgeries now.
Hmm.
They're testing it out with where the doctor is using a virtual reality, augmented reality interface, and then a robot arm physically is doing the actual operation.
Hmm.
But the doctor controlling it. So I think real world applications of VR is going to be more useful than gaming. And especially, it always comes down to the military. The military is going to be the first to exploit VR technologies,
Hmm.
especially with drones and robots and so forth. I think that's where you're going to see the most advancement. Well, you're going to see some of it because probably a lot of it's top secret, but that's where most of the applications of VR is going to be in real world, not gaming. That's just my opinion on it.
Yeah, I guess there's still some other avenues for entertainment as well, right? So like for concerts or sports events or venues or movies even, right? Maybe just putting um you're able to interact in a whole different level from a VR standpoint, but you can still do it from home. So I
Yeah,
think that
and
that might be pretty cool.
speaking of which, YouTube, they just had an update where they have a VR
Hmm.
section for Google Cardboard,
Yeah.
and so I'm gonna have to get me one. I just want to see
Yeah.
if it's any good. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be cool, and it's free. So I mean, well,
Hmm.
the cardboard's not free, but the feature's free.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess hardware is starting to come to the point where, VR can be put out on a, pretty massive level. Anyways, yeah, so they had some cool VR stuff at PlayStation Experience as well. And then I guess we could end this topic with Hideo Kojima. So if you guys don't know, Hideo Kojima is pretty much the mastermind behind the Metal Gear Solid series. It's a critically acclaimed series that first came out on the Sony MX. Anyways, the game came out in the 80s. The one that really blew up was Metal Gear Solid that came out on PlayStation. At the time, the graphics are amazing. The gameplay was very different than what anyone uh, was used to. It was a tactical stealth espionage, which is in the subtitle of the game. But yeah, so Hideo Kojima, he had a pretty big legacy of Metal Gear Solid. there's been 5 main games plus a lot of spin-offs, and a lot of people have really considered his games like works of art, right? Like it kind of transcends the boundary of just gaming. And so if you don't know, Konami's been trying to step out of AAA gaming production pretty recently, and I want to say like the only games they're going to keep on doing is PES, which is Pro Evolution Soccer, because sports games sell, especially soccer. And I want to say that Metal Gear Solid 5 might be their last big AAA game. So Konami and the mastermind behind the last big Metal Gear Solid game had a lot of disputes, and it just seems that from a Japanese work culture standpoint, they're just shaming him. No one knows what they got into argument about or quarrel about, but it's gone so far to where they took his name off the game box. He received awards at a game show and he couldn't even receive them. So I mean, what else do you know about the Hideo Kojima situation?
Yeah, this was it's been a pretty bad year for Konami in terms of PR. They got a new CEO, basically a new leadership team, and they started converting everything over to their most profitable areas, which is mobile games and their pinball machines, and their casino machines. Most people don't know, but Konami, they make a lot of money off of their casino and pinball
Like
games.
pachinko, right? Specifically
Yeah,
like pachinko type games and things like that.
pachinko in Japan, but if you actually go to any U.S. casinos,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of their casino games are actually made by Konami, which is weird.
I mean,
But
it's a
yeah,
pretty like it's low risk, right? I mean, as far as like the revenue you get out of it, like the cost of development must be like pretty minuscule on those types of games. So
yeah, and it's
yeah.
not like Konami just barely started this. They've been doing this for years, and most of these game companies they are diversified in a lot of different areas. And so that's where they make most of the money. Their pachinko, pinball games, their mobile games, especially, has become their newest form of profitability. And so it didn't make sense for them to invest in AAA games. But the way they did it, it's just really bad. I mean, it first started off with the Igarashi, who is the Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Right.
I mean, and then with Hideo Kojima, it's been like a year-long affair. Like everything that you said just happened, but this most recent one, that was really unexpected because a big event. I mean, the Gamers Awards is pretty big, and so when he was about to, when they announced Metal Gear Solid 5, you would think that Hideo Kojima is going to go get it, go up there and thank everybody, but instead their lawyers, Konami's lawyers, made sure that Hideo didn't get the award.
I
And
think he can even attend the game show at that.
yes, if he did, he
Yeah.
probably would have sued. And if you realize this past year, you haven't heard a single word out of Hideo Kojima. That's because they probably have a no talk clause, or he'll get which is really unfortunate. And that's kind of like where the way the gamescape is going, at least for the big time publishers. It's like the developers, the people who actually help create game, they're nothing. It's all about the IP and it's all about how much money you could make. And I get it, it's a business, but the way that they're doing this to the creators is really bad, especially in Japan where shaming is part of their culture. I mean, you could have been like Miyamoto and they would make you a janitor. I mean, if I don't know if anybody remembers, but Yu Suzuki, he was the mastermind behind Virtual Fighter,
Shenmue.
behind USA, Shenmue, so many things. But whenever Shenmue bombed on the Dreamcast, you never really heard anything from him again, until the recent Kickstarter, Shenmue 3, and that's just one small part of it. And I hope in the future, Hideo Kojima is able to create his own games, maybe through crowdfunding. I'm not sure what the legal cause is going to be, but I hope that happens because that's just really bad. That's just wrong on so many levels.
Yeah, I mean, he's been with Konami for like well over 20 years, and Metal Gear Solid is by no means a small series. It's sold millions probably across every game, individually. So yeah, it's really interesting, and I guess we can only speculate on what really happened, or something had to go down for it to be this big of an issue between both of them. But
Yeah, and I think, to me personally, I think it was their way of showing other developers, who the boss is. Because I mean, if you're able to shame somebody who is that legendary, they could do that to anybody. And speaking of Japanese work culture, did you want to talk about their average work culture? Not even just in gaming, but period.
yeah, I mean, I've heard here and there that they work crazy out like 60 to 80 hours a week, you know, pretty much just live, breathe, eat, sleep, work. Even to the point where maybe that's partial to why the suicide rate is so high in Japan. You know, it could also be a work thing. And I guess the only other things I've heard is like they don't fire you outright, but they put you in a position where you just want to quit, right?
Yeah, and they pay you crap.
Mm-hmm. I guess a lot of the Japanese work culture is kind of like a labor of love, right? Like the people who are working, and the reason why they work so hard and so adamant is because, yeah, they're just passionate for their job, and like it's just a known standard over there in Japan, right?
Yeah, well, I think I watched some series about the Japanese work culture and how it used to be the culture of the businessman. Okay, the businessman would come home to his wife and kids, and then he would have a mistress on the side. And for them to work 80 hours a week, that was normal. But it wasn't because it was a passion thing. It's because that's what was expected. Okay, but then when Japan had a recession of over 15 plus years, most people are unemployed and most people are living in coffee shops, with internet and so forth. I mean, the work culture has changed a lot, and there is a term for suicide. I can't remember what it is, but there's really a technical term for people who commit suicide because of work. So the work culture's changed a lot, and you could see that by the birth rates in Japan. It's been low, less than 2% or something. And so less people are having families because things are unstable. They've been unstable for a long time, and the companies that hire these people, they have really no respect for them. So it's a completely different work culture. I really don't think it's about passion at all. It's just that that's kind of what's expected. But now you get nothing out of it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
except shame.
Yeah, but at that point, it's like, what can you do, right? You need a job. You just kind of have to conform to the standards.
Yeah, yeah, and there is a small growing indie development scene. More people because of the Western technologies. Like
Mm-hmm.
more people are communicating online now. A lot of younger groups they're trying to work more remotely. Have their own indie community. It's growing slowly but surely.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be a new wave of workers in Japan.
Yeah. Um,
It's I'd have to say it's pretty sad.
yeah, yeah, definitely. But it's been like that for a while, and hopefully things get better for them. Kind of doubt it, but I don't know too much about it, so I can't really say. Okay. Anyways, yeah. So now, we'll wrap up the PSX experience with that. I guess now we can talk more about the iPhone taking away the 3.5 millimeter jack. So I haven't heard too much about this either, but from a surface level, that I heard that they're taking it out because it's going to make the phone too thick, right? And they're going for more, just trying to make the phone thinner, or at least that's their reasoning behind it. So what they say.
Yeah, I don't agree with that neither. It's just that Apple and other companies, it's not just Apple, they've been consistently but slowly removing stuff. You remember they removed the CD-ROM drive,
Hmm.
CD-DVD drive. Now that's like a normal thing for you not to have a drive on there, which I think sucks. Their phones have never had a micro SD card slot. You know, so and also their FireWire port, and they have a Thunderbolt port. To me, it's all about monetizing it, because when you take away something, people will now see it as an added value, but then you'd have to buy a $50 accessory to make it work, and
Hmm.
then the next model is incompatible with the last one. So I really think that, that is just some marketing speak. It's not about it being thin, because these phones are thin already.
Hmm.
It's just that it's a way for them to monetize it. Now, when you don't have this feature available, what do you have to do? Well, all your earphones don't work anymore. So now you're going to have to buy their branded products, whether it's Bluetooth, whether it doesn't matter. You're going to have to buy it. And guess what? They have Beats Audio now. They could easily sell you on their Apple products,
Branded,
their Apple
yeah.
earphones, which are only compatible with their products. And so, they could set up for hundreds of dollars. And so it's all about monetization. To me, it's kind of sad, because things that you would take for granted before, your computers had everything. You could use your drives, you could connect all types of stuff to it. You can use external drives. There were so many things that you can do, but now it's very limited. They want everything controlled storage-wise on the cloud, and they want you to buy as many accessories as possible. So yeah, it's kind of sad to me. I mean, why would you do that? I mean,
Hmm.
why? Because now all your earphones are useless if you want the one.
Right, right. And I guess the average consumer, they're not going to be. I don't know. I don't know how they would feel about it. I know, like maybe like the hardcore, you know, headphone community. Of course, they'd be upset about it. Like now they can't use any of their headphones because like all the high end headphones are gonna be wired. You know, there's really no such thing as a high end wireless headphone that can
Yeah,
compare to anything close to a traditional wired set. So I guess that community is just niche enough for it to not matter. But what about what Google did when they took out the SD cards in their phones? I mean, isn't this
yeah.
something similar to that? And what was the reasoning behind that?
I mean, Google is following other manufacturers, mainly Apple, because Apple never had a micro SD card slot ever.
Hmm.
So, with Google, their strategy was a little different. They weren't a hardware manufacturer, so they would partner with other hardware manufacturers with Android and gave it away for free. But there's going to be cost involved. And so now that they have a market share, Android is the largest mobile OS in the whole world. It's probably the largest OS by installer base, period, with over 1 billion users. Now they have a lot of control. And starting with their Nexus line, they kind of crept in just a little bit, you know with no expandable storage. And their reasoning has always been it's faster that way, it's less corruption. But that's crap. It's crap. And so now with their new Nexus XP and whatever Nexus lines that they're coming up, it's not too hard to believe that they're going to become a competitor to their partners, and all their phones going to be more like the iPhones, because Apple, they have the best model for monetization, period. If you think about objectively the features that they give you, and usually their hardware is usually a 1 year or a year and a half behind Android phones, right? And also they actually give you the less features. I mean, try sticking your phone into your computer without having iTunes required. Unless you have like Linux, I stick it in, it works fine. Or you have to have an accessories to make things work, right? So Google is heading the same way, and it's all about money. It's all about profitability. So Google, the advantage they have is a lot of people use the Google services already, and that's cross-platform. So now when they get into the hardware game, they're going to be able to make even more money, and they have the complete ecosystem. That's one thing that Apple is trying to do. They're trying to create more services related stuff. So Google is going the opposite way. So I think that's why they did it. It's all about monetizing it.
Okay, so as a more informed user, how do you feel about these changes? I mean, it just seems like we had to adapt and cope with it. There's not much we can do unless something comes out like left field that it's just for targeted towards people like us.
Yeah, I think people who are more techie, more informed, you don't have a choice as well. I mean, and that's kind of goes into my conversation about the Microsoft stuff. It's all related,
Hmm.
you know. As we go further and further, uh, the majority of people, you won't have a choice anyway, even if you don't like it. I mean, unless you build your own product and your own ecosystem, it's you kind of have to go with whatever they have, you know.
So for now, you just see it more as like an illusion of choice, between like Android and iPhone. Eventually, it's gonna probably boil down to almost very very similar phones or experiences.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, just look at the way Google's been going. I mean, they're becoming more and more like Apple, right? So, and Microsoft, they've already been heading that way anyway. They've been around the space. So all of them are going towards, they're all going towards the same place. So the more control that they can have, like Apple is very vertical, so they have the control over everything from the application stack all the way down to the hardware, and so and services. So they have all of that, and so a lot of these other companies, they're trying to go vertical as well, because that's where you make the most money in any company. If you go vertical, you have more control. The only disadvantage is if the vertical doesn't work, or you're kind of so focused that you get screwed. But these companies, they're very well diversified. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that, I guess you want to get into your Microsoft rant.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So to preface, I believe you just got a new laptop, right? Did that come with Windows 10 pre-installed onto it?
So let me go over my brief experience. I'm a firm believer in software. And so I don't really upgrade stuff very often. I try to milk the software as much as possible. And so my previous laptop, I had two previous laptops. The first one was a Dell 810, and for people who don't know, that came out in 2005. So I used that for quite a long time. And then my last one was a Toshiba Satellite, and it was like 6, 7 years old. And the only reason I was able to still use those laptops because of the software, which is Linux. I use Linux Mint. And so Linux runs great on older hardware. And so I was still able to do 90% of everything that I would need on those laptops. But, the hardware at this many years, for it to still be working, that's pretty amazing. And so I had to upgrade. And so my choices pretty much were going to be Windows machine. I'm not really into the Apple ecosystem, and I'm not going to pay that much money for it. And so my thought was just to get a Windows 10 laptop. And so I've been looking, but after a while, I thought, well, I don't really need a Windows 10 machine. So instead, I got this older one right here. I don't know if you could see it. It's a, can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
So it's a Hewlett Packard. It's like last year, but it's pretty powerful. It's got an AMD A8 APU and a GPU. It's got a Radeon R5 a GPU in there. It's a quad core processor. It's got 4 gigs of DDR3 memory. It's got a 500 gig hard drive. So it's pretty beastly, especially for Linux. So when I got it, it had Windows 8.1 and it was upgradable to Windows 10. And I haven't used Windows in a long time, and so I kind of figured when I get it, what I wanted to do was just partition the hard drive and have a dual boot system,
Mhm.
right? And I thought it'd be pretty easy. And then I ran into the problems, and I started getting really pissed off. First thing being, from Windows 8 and on, especially with Windows 10, it's really hard to access the BIOS. Before your system BIOS, all you'd have to do is just reset your machine, and normally you press F2, F10, or escape, and you can get into the BIOS and change the boot settings, right? But in this case, Windows, they use a new thing called UEFI, and it's actually Secure Boot, but UEFI is their version of Secure Boot. And so what that means is whenever you boot up your computer, the hardware checks to see if there's a certified Microsoft operating system on there on the bootloader sector, which allows it to boot up your computer. So that's good for like security. So then you don't get malware into the bootloader. But the problem is you can't install any other operating system on there. Because it checks to make sure Microsoft is on there. And so there was ways that you could dual boot, but that required you really getting into the software. And so that was the biggest pain that I had. And when I got into there and just for example, in order for you to get into the BIOS, you would have to go into your Windows, into your settings, and then you have to go to recovery, and then from recovery you have to go into advanced settings, and then from advanced settings, then you could go into the BIOS settings, and then you'd have to reboot, and then from there you would have to change your boot settings, and you could turn off UEFI, and that's just your BIOS. And then if you were trying to partition, which what I was trying to do, the Windows, they had 4 different partitions. It had the recovery partitions. It had the main partition. I couldn't shrink it because it had some system files embedded right there in the middle. Now you can spend a lot of time. You could buy some partitioning tools and you could spend the time to actually move these files, but that's a pain in the butt. And at the same time, that doesn't guarantee that later on the bootloader won't change and then you can't even boot up any of your operating systems. So that was a pain in the ass. And
But
so
so isn't that more of like the so with the EFI and things like that? Isn't that more on the BIOS, the hardware level? So like that would be on the HP side, right? The BIOS that they put on the motherboard. Because like I imagine that if you build a desktop and you try to dual boot it, it should really be no problem to dual boot like a Windows partition and a Linux partition, like on a custom built desktop. So at that point,
well,
does it boil down to the laptop or the laptop's manufacturer who decides that?
no, it's driven by Microsoft. Okay, because Microsoft prior to Windows 10, they were like, okay, with UEFI, we give the hardware manufacturers have to give you an option to turn it off. Okay, but starting Windows 10 on, it's optional. So in terms of whenever you install Windows 10, okay, it's automatically going to be UEFI. You know what I mean? If you build it yourself, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure they're going to force that on there. But it is based upon the manufacturer. But now, since Windows is given the option to not give that option to turn it off, I think it's going to be more standard where you have to run the Windows OS on there. You don't have a choice. And with Windows 10, you can't even easily get into the settings to turn it off anymore. So I think that's mainly driven by Microsoft. You know, they're the largest OS provider for desktops, period. And so the manufacturers, of course, they want to have more control as well. And so I'm going to be thinking it's going to be a standard. You know, if you do it yourself, great, but that doesn't mean that with every release version of Windows that they're not going to force it on you. You know, which leads me to the privacy options, the privacy thing about Windows. For me, when I was trying to reboot it, you know, anybody who's used Windows knows that they have these random system updates. But this one was just crazy. I had two updates. It took an hour for each update to go in, and
Are you
you
talking
really don't
about
know.
8.1 or 10?
8.1,
Okay.
but it doesn't matter. It's very obtrusive. On the top of it, you don't even know what updates that they're putting in there. And then, you know, I remembered why I hated Windows. There were so many pop-ups. I refreshed the whole Windows install. I wiped everything out. It had so many pop-ups. I had security warnings just by sticking in my USB drive. I had antivirus stuff come up, so it was a pain. And and because of it, I started finding out all of the new Windows 10 security features. Basically, Windows 10 is spyware. I mean, they monitor everything, even simple things like Cortana. They remind that, and they have a built-in key logger, and so they log all your key presses. And also, they have this thing called Wi-Fi Sense, where they share your Wi-Fi information with people that use Windows 10. Obviously, they have to be in your communities, but still, you know, they don't even have to put in a password. It just automatically provides it to them. And then also, if you're on the cloud, which most they want you to be on the cloud, it already shares all your contact information with Microsoft. And then it shares stuff in the background. It's constantly sending information back to Microsoft. And if you look at how to shut these things off, it's not simple. I mean, you have your browser that you have to turn off the privacy stuff and turn it on. You have your Cortana stuff. Then you have like deeply embedded privacy settings as well. And some of the things you just can't turn off. And so that's a pain. And even if you are a real techie and you're able to go in and disable all these things, Microsoft's constantly pushing on updates, which can, you know, put more security related updates on there. And a few months ago, this was a big thing in the tech community, how they were just like really bashing Microsoft for putting in all these privacy features, you know. And Microsoft was very open, saying that, you know, we want to do this to help enhance your experience, but at the same time, we could give this information to the government authorities if they needed it. And so it's just a pain. I mean, I did finally I was able to get Linux Mint on there. I'm running Linux Mint 7.2 Raphael. So I basically just gave up on the partitioning, and I completely put Linux on top of it. However, people who are buying brand new laptops with Windows 10, I'm not sure how easy it's going to be to do that. You know, some Linux manufacturers, they said it'll work with UEFI, but in the future, who knows if even that will work. So I don't know. It just goes back to the conversations we'd had before. When you buy your products more and more now, you don't own it. I can't do what I want with my laptop, and this last experience that I had with Windows, that just confirms it. I mean, and I'm a nerd. I'm a geek. I'm able to figure stuff out. But for me to take like 2 days to figure that out, I can't imagine anybody who's a mass consumer. You're just screwed. You know, you really can't do much about it. You know, so that was my rant. I was just really pissed off, and I'm pretty sure I'm never gonna go back to Windows. You know, with that experience that I had, and it was just so annoying having all those pop-ups and all the warnings and all the messages, and on top of it, my computer froze twice. Brand new fresh install. Yeah, not happy
Mhm.
about it.
Yeah, so I guess I have to weigh in because with Service Pro, you know, I pretty much am forced to use Windows 10 just because like I'm pretty sure like the driver support for touchscreens and pens wouldn't be nearly as strong, you know, on a Linux distro. Um, but I do agree with you. I feel like Windows 10 is an improvement from a user experience standpoint over Windows 8.1. I guess it's more akin to 7 as far as like they do like window management a lot better in Windows 10, so that's something I like. But as far as like, you know, auto privacy concerns and security updates, yeah, I have noticed that there's a lot more of that. You know, there's probably like a lot of settings you want to turn off, like, but you know, again, it's hard to, or you don't even know where to look in the first place to turn it off. I mean, in my
Yeah,
experience with it has been, it's been okay. I haven't had any real complaints other than like, yeah, I guess knowing that they are sending a lot of information back and forth to Microsoft. But maybe at this point, I'm just used to it because like all your other apps do that as well. It's like, for your phone and things like that, like, for Facebook or whatever. Yeah, so maybe
Yeah,
I'm just, oh, go ahead.
no. Well, and that's the thing that concerns me is because all of these companies, they're all doing the same thing. And we talked about security being hacked all the time, so people are now used to, and this wasn't something that was by accident. These companies engineered and marketed this, so people are used to giving away their privacy. They're used to it, and they're used to having less choices, even though there's an illusion of choice. So even for people like ourselves who are capable of doing this, and at some point, even Linux itself is going to be harder and harder to, you're going to have less freedom. That's just my feeling. Even if you move to a platform like Apple's Mac OS, they monitor a lot of things as well, and they have a lot of control over their hardware. Try putting a different operating system on a Mac. It's really hard. You could build a Hackintosh, but that takes skill in it of itself. And so I'm gonna hold on to as much choice as I can. And right now, Linux is my choice, but I'm not sure how much longer that's going to be because these companies still need money to run their businesses, right? I mean, even Ubuntu, they have advertising. They have advertising partnerships with Amazon, on their OS. So I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I just know I'm not going to be using Windows. That's all I know.
Mhm. Yeah, so you're more concerned, I guess, from the OS itself, but as far as like Windows usability, it would be able to do everything you want it to do, right?
Say that
It
again.
would, as far as like, so you're more concerned with the OS itself and like the hardware, but as far as like usability as an OS, for productivity, it would be able to do everything you need it to do, right? So your web development and your like things like podcasting and things like that, right?
Oh yeah, this is why I'm so glad I got this new computer because of Linux already ran great on my old laptops, but with this one it's blazing fast, and since it does have a very powerful GPU, I'm able to do everything that I couldn't do before, such as video editing. I could do it really fast. I have a lot of programming software on this. I have publishing software. Everything that I would do on the Windows machine, I could do it on here. At least for me,
Hmm.
I could do everything that I would need, and that's mainly because number one, the software, the Linux, it's amazing. I still think Linux is the best out there. But coupled with really powerful hardware, I'm able to do 95% of everything that I would need to on the Windows machine. About the only thing that I can't do on this, if you use like Adobe products, you can still use GIMP and stuff, but you really need a Windows machine on that. And also
Hmm.
for gaming, you're gonna need a Windows machine. I mean, Steam is great. It's bringing a lot of games to Linux, but it's gonna take some time. If you want the best in gaming, you still need a Windows machine.
Hmm.
Even more so than an Apple machine. Gaming, that's the only way you could go. And so I think like in the next few years, that's going to change. I think Windows, Microsoft, they know that. They know that more people are moving towards Apple, but they're also moving towards Linux. If most people don't know, but Android is built on top of a Linux kernel. So that has to really scare them because more people are using their browsers now. That's the number one software now that people use is their browsers. And unfortunately, Microsoft doesn't have the number one market share anymore. So that's what they're afraid of, and I could understand why they're doing this, but it's at the cost of the consumer experience and their ability to choose. And so I could rant on this for hours, but
Hmm.
it just really pissed me off having to
Yeah.
go through this. You know.
But
But I'm
yeah,
good
so
now.
but yours is like a pretty specific, news case, right? I guess average consumer, they'd be fine with Windows 10. They wouldn't be aware of all the, security policies or privacy policies. And then again, Windows 10 would be able to do everything that they needed to do. Um, I guess from a developer standpoint, I'm finding out more and more that Windows machine OSs aren't great for web development. A lot of things like Node.js doesn't work very well with Windows. So what I decided to do was, so I have a server at home that's running Arc Linux. Um, and what I do, I just use Windows as like a code editor. So basically, I can use my IDEs, and then I'm just going to SSH into my home server and just upload the code and do all the work from there. So
Yeah,
then,
and
my desktop and my Surface Pro, it's just a front to edit code, and then all the actual work goes to my server at home on a Linux machine.
I think for a lot of people who are in the tech space, like myself, I do I do a lot of stuff on the web, like websites and so forth, but I also do publishing. And so it's going to become where you're going to have multiple platforms. Like on my Linux box, I have Wine. so that it allows me to run Windows programs. And so you're gonna be multi software. You're gonna have some stuff that's Apple related, some that's Microsoft, some that's Google, and some that's Linux. I think if you're in the tech space, you have to be able to use more than one platform. There's really no way around that. So
Yeah, and so I guess, it really does depend on your needs and which software you specifically want to use. If you're an artist, you probably want to go with Windows, or Windows or Mac.
yeah,
For the
Mac.
Adobe Suite,
Yeah,
if like a 3D modeler, producer, things like that. So, Windows still does have that strong software support for it, but I would say maybe for development, again, that depends on what kind of development you do. I'm starting to prefer Linux for web development over anything because it just works.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, again, the average consumer, they probably won't know the difference. And
No,
so,
I mean the consumer for them, it's either going to be Windows or Mac. That's it. There's nothing else.
yeah. But yeah, and I've been using Windows for quite a long time. Windows 7 is still pretty okay in my book. I have Windows 8.1 on my work laptop. Not a big fan of the UI or the user experience on that one, but I feel like Windows 10 fixed a lot of things on it. But at the end of the day, for me, I feel it's less and less about, the OS itself and more about what it can do for my needs, right? So, it's not like I'm a diehard Windows fan or a diehard Linux fan. They're just tools for my, for my means.
Yeah, and that's the whole point that I was trying to make with if you're in a tech space, you use whatever tools are available because that's why you have so many different platforms. You have to be able to use whatever the best tool is for that point in time. I use all services related. I mean, it's not just hardware based. A lot of these services that we use are software. We don't use just like one browser, and then even within a browser, you have different platforms. You have Facebook, that's a platform. You have YouTube, but then you have Apple, iTunes as well. If you're publishing stuff for iBooks, those are completely different platforms. And so I think more and more as we go along forward, even mass consumers, they're already using multi-platform anyway. They just don't realize it. So yeah, that's where we are. I mean, you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, but I guess like, the older I get and like the more I'm getting to like the development world, I'm starting to see that like before, if I was using Windows platform and I couldn't do something on it or something errored out or, I couldn't figure something out, I'd just be like, oh, I guess I just can't do it in Windows then. I'm not going to try anything else. But now, if it doesn't work in Windows, I'll just go straight to Linux and see if it works there. And vice versa, right? If it doesn't work in Linux, then I'll see if it works in Windows or whatever. But yeah, at the end of the day, they're just tools to me now, and I don't really have like a strong affiliation to either or. Just whatever works, whatever is like the most efficient and best for me at that point in time. But
yeah, I don't think it's. I myself, I always prefer Linux because that meets my needs the best. But in terms of like being fanboys or fangirls, I think those days are pretty much over because everything's like so much cross multi-platform anyway. So you can't be a diehard only anymore of anything. It's impossible.
Yep. But I guess I'll continue to use Windows as my daily driver. Hasn't really stopped me from doing anything that I do daily. And then I have my Linux platform for development, so I can work with both. And gaming as well, So it's just more convenient for me to just boot straight into Windows.
I think for myself, I might start to, now that I have more powerful hardware, I might just start to dip into Steam, just to try, Team Fortress is free. My hardware can handle it now, so it'd be interesting. I've never really tried Linux gaming before.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't. So.
Yeah.
That's all I had for my rant. It was a pretty long rant, but it's been such a long time since I've had to deal with something like that. But that really just, no end. I had to think about it. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm sure a lot of people share your frustrations, and maybe a lot of people have to say, "Oh, well, for them, Windows just works for them," or whatever. But yeah, so the only thing I'm really fanboying over now, even like with video games, right? I don't have like a clear like console. I'll play Xbox, PS4, PC, whatever. Game is good on either or. The only thing I want to claim affiliation to is probably like gaming peripherals, like my keyboard and my mouse and things like that. I'm a firm believer in that there are some brands that are better than others.
No doubt.
But that comes down to, so that preference is different, right? Like before it's more of like a software preference, like PS4, Xbox One, PC, they all do the same thing. They all play games, right?
Yeah,
Um,
and especially when the games are available on all platforms. So
yeah, but the difference is like small, you know, minute differences in like the software side of things, right? Like the interface for PC to PS4 to 360 or to Xbox One. But I feel like from a hardware standpoint, it's a lot easier to fanboy over there or to, claim affiliation, right? Because like,
yeah,
for example, the keyboards, they actually do feel very, very different from each other. And so that's more of like a visceral touch, right? You're actually physically interacting with it. So you can still, have major preference over there. But I guess for software, we're starting to lose out on that preference, right? Because everything, like you said, it's just starting to become the same thing.
yeah.
But yeah. All right. So, that's all the topics we had for today. Thanks for listening, guys. Hope we had some interesting topics for you. Let us know your thoughts. Like, comment, subscribe, and yeah, just if she wants to talk about anything or weigh in, definitely let us know. And thanks for sticking with us. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for listening to Geekbrostalk.